Hello, everyone, and welcome to Teach the Truth Thursday. My name is Sierra Thomas, and I am an intern here at Athens Anti-Discrimination Movement. The movement advocates for racial and social justice and strives to combat discrimination through education and activism. Athens Anti-Discrimination Movement offers various workshops, programs, and resources designed to help citizens protect their civil and human rights. Teaching the truth is important by working not only to fix the problems of today, but for future generations. Our purpose is to teach the whole truth and avoid the aspects of history that make us uncomfortable. I will pass it over to Chaplain Cole, who will give you an introduction.
To try to teach our children about difficult knowledge, we do an entire generation of young people a disservice because we're not telling the truth. And so, again, we come here tonight to say to our brothers and sisters across the country, but particularly here in the South, that it's time. It's past time that we told the whole truth about our nation's history. And so we have to remember there is no left and no right, no Democrat, no Republican. We are all Americans. Americans with a complex history, but at the end of the day, we are all Americans. Teach the Truth Thursdays is about having so much love for this country that we have educators from all over the South who are pledging to teach the truth in their classrooms. And so tonight, we're extremely pleased to have Ms. Beth Mendenhall, who is a world history teacher at Cedar Shoals High School, who is going to be teaching tonight's class, The Desegregation of Athens, Georgia Schools. Ms. Mendenhall moved to Athens in the summer of 2020 from Indianapolis, where she taught high school and middle school history and sociology. Beth is a graduate of Butler University in Indianapolis and has a master's degree in history from Indiana State University, where she concentrated on the long civil rights movement. Her master's thesis was on the open schools movement during the desegregation crisis following the Brown versus Board of Education decision. Before becoming a teacher, Beth was a radio news reporter and then worked in the concert promotion industry. Her greatest work is raising 3 daughters who share her passion for fairness and social justice. Tonight, on behalf of Mocha Jasmine Johnson and the Athens Anti-Discrimination Movement, AADM, I proudly introduce our guest instructor for tonight, Ms. Beth Mendenhall.
Hi, everybody. Well, it's great to be here, and I appreciate you all coming to spend some time together and explore this history together. I am going to share my screen. Make sure I have the audio sharing too. I do. And we're going to do something called a Pear Deck. So if you can open another tab on your window and then go to this link, joinpd.com. And then it will ask you for a code, and you can use this code YHHGBH. And this is going to take us through slides, but it's also going to give you a chance to participate as well. There will be some questions for you to answer and some things for you to think about. and your participation is part of your grade. Just kidding. Just wanted to feel like I was in class. All right, I think if anyone is still trying to get in, I'm going to start, but you'll be able to see the code up in the upper right corner. See up here in the corner, YHHGBH, and this should have opened the slides on your computers.
Yes.
And every now and then there'll be a chance for you to participate. So we are going to cover a brief history of Athens Public Schools desegregation. This was a long process and there are a lot of moving parts. And as I've researched it, sometimes I found conflicting information. So if you all know something that is different, feel free to speak up and let me know so we can correct our history. So we'll start off with a question for all of you, and then we can have a discussion too. But what do you think is the lasting impact of Brown versus Board of Education? Go ahead and type your response in, and I'm going to show the responses so everybody, they won't see your name, but they can see what you're typing. So we'll have a nice little collaboration.
Can you move your chat box just a little? To the
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, let me know if the bar gets in the way too.
She says she knows the code, but where am I supposed to go to add it?
Joinpd.com.
Join PD. Thank you. So anybody else who comes in, is it going to be able, like anybody new that comes in, is it going to be able to see it? So we'll have to face it. Yeah, I'll be. I love that.
I do too. It's really fun. Really great responses. This works really well in high school where kids are very exposed talking in class and that they're anonymous here so they can have these conversations without feeling.
Yeah.
That's a really good point.
Mhm.
Yeah. So does anybody want to talk about their what they're thinking? Yeah, I can't see the panel.
Mhm.
Can
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, we can see it. We'll monitor it.
Okay. So did anyone see anything that surprised them? And would anyone like to share their thoughts about either what they wrote or what they're seeing other people wrote? Yeah.
Hey y'all, so this is Amelia talking on the mic from AADM, and I'm thinking about the comment that Beth has pulled up right now, unskilled white women teaching Black boys. And I think it's interesting that when we think about Brown v. Board, we forget that many of the Black teachers who were in the Black schools lost their jobs as white Black students integrated into white schools, and that it produced a phenomenon where white women were kind of positioned as inherently better for some reason, when in fact they really lacked the cultural competencies to foster and engage these youth. So I was really appreciative of whoever wrote that comment for raising that history to the surface of Brown v. Board, as somebody who's really interested in women teachers and their working history. So thank you for reminding us that that is one of the lasting legacies of Brown v. Board.
Anyone else want to share? You can raise your hand or just hop on in. All right, well, we can keep moving forward. So to talk about desegregation, you kind of have to talk about the history of education and Black education in the South after the Civil War as well. Well, even going back to before the Civil War, I think it's important to understand how connected education was with power. And the white people who owned enslaved people would not let them learn to write. It was a crime for an enslaved person of color to learn to read or write, and they could get killed for being able to read or write. And the people helping them could also be punished. So and education was a right that was denied to people of color until after the Civil War. It certainly happened underground. There were certainly free and enslaved Black people who were learning how to read and write and educating themselves, but it was very difficult and it was illegal in most of the South. After the Civil War, there was a huge hunger for education among the African-American community, and schools were immediately opened. In fact, here in Athens, right after the Emancipation Proclamation, a group of Black men went to UGA and tried to get on campus and take it over and start learning. White UGA students ran them off with guns, but I think that demonstrates the desire for knowledge that was in the Black community immediately after emancipation. So through the Freedmen's Bureau, several schools were open. There were also a lot of private church schools. There were some Northern philanthropists that provided schools. The Rosenwald family opened about 5,000 schools in the South. There's a picture on the slide of the Rosenwald School that was in Athens, which that building is still there, I believe. They're trying to save it. I think Athens Historic Landmarks is trying to protect it from being torn down, but that is a Rosenwald school. And there were also genus supervisors who were, I think that was run primarily by Quakers. So those were Northern women who would come down into the South, and they ran schools where they would teach Black women how to be teachers. So they were kind of teaching supervisors, but they helped improve the Black schools. In the South, there wasn't a lot of education before this, public education before the Civil War. In Georgia, there was not a public education system set up at all. That didn't happen really a decade or two after Reconstruction, because there really wasn't money. The idea for public schools was there, but the money wasn't. But once it got up and running, of course, it was a dual system. So there were white schools and Black schools. And we're really talking about how that dual system then became a single system. Any questions or comments about this part? And feel free to ask questions in the chat. All right, so under the, why am I not? Anyway, separate but equal was the way the schools were set up. So it was separate, that part was right, but the equal part was not. Funding was different between the schools. Most of the Black schools were very small, run down, with or without plumbing. Teachers weren't paid very well. This is just an example for 1 year. The student population was 61% white and 39% Black, and the white schools were receiving 91% of the funding. Are you able to see the whole
Yeah, you can't see
slide?
the whole slide.
Okay,
Can you, it's
yeah.
maybe, if you do a command and then a minus. You know what I mean? Uh-huh.
I think it's a Pear Deck thing. I don't think it's the Zoom. Oh,
Okay, yeah, so if you move your, so do you need to have the, can you minimize
Oh.
that? Oh, no,
yeah, it's not the Zoom bar, it's the Pear Deck bar,
Mhm.
but that's all right. I think there's just a few slides that have stuff way down. Oh, there. Okay. So again, the schools were small. Most of the supplies that they got, these are the public schools, had hand-me-down books and supplies. That's really the most common thread that you read about when you read about the experience of these students, is that the books were used, there were pages missing, they were all marked up. And somebody mentioned this to me the other day when we were talking about it. One of the students here in Athens who integrated schools was saying it wasn't even just that, it was also, you know, all of the books, even new books, had a colonizer point of view. So they were all written from a white standpoint. The teachers weren't paid very well. The schools were overcrowded, and some of them were so overcrowded that students would come in split shifts. So you would have a class of students in the morning, and then you would have another class of students in the afternoon because they couldn't all fit in the school together. So, and often the school years for the Black schools were short. A lot of their, you know, the planners would say an educated Black person makes a bad field hand. You know, white people were not in favor of Black people getting an education because they wanted this labor force to exploit. The positive aspects of these Black schools, and there were many, and there are most of the people who write about their experience in the Black schools just remember especially the teachers being very caring and having very high expectations for them. And that was something that was lost, they felt, when the schools were integrated. Schools were also the cultural centers for the community. They were a place where people met. The teachers really helped build the Black middle class. So these schools were very important in the Black community.
Beth, okay, so they can't see because that is there. So we can
Oh.
move that.
Just minimize it, like there's that.
Yeah, minimize it right there.
And then you can also tell folks if they go to the tab where the Pear Deck is open, they can see everything.
Okay. Oh yeah, if you're looking on Zoom, you'll see one thing, but if you're on the Pear Deck
Right.
tab, you'll see
'Cause
something
I'm on
else.
Pear Deck, I see it.
Okay.
Clear.
But you gotta, but a lot of people are gonna be able to go back. and
Yeah.
forth.
I can move these. Thank you for letting me know.
Sorry, yeah. I just-
No, that's all right.
I wanted it to be a good view for the people who are on Zoom.
You would think I'd be better at Zooming and all this experience, but anyway. So anyway, there were a lot of positives, and I pretty much said everything that's on the slide, so you didn't miss anything. So we're just going to kind of go through a timeline, because like I said, there's quite a few moving parts, and I want to go through all of these things. So the whole idea of separate but Ferguson starts or separate but equal started with the Plessy versus Ferguson Supreme Court ruling in 1896. And that really was the basis of Jim Crow and separate facilities, schools and otherwise, just all public facilities. So that started to change in 1954 with the Brown ruling. And there were actually two Brown rulings because they weren't super clear. Neither of them were super clear about how this was supposed to happen. The first Brown ruling, and it was a unanimous Supreme Court ruling, which was very powerful, just said that separate but equal, had no place and that it was unconstitutional, but it didn't really have a game plan. The second ruling didn't clarify a lot more, except for it added with all deliberate speed, which of course was subject to interpretation. So immediately after Brown, many Southern states started something called massive resistance, which was different ways to not comply with Brown, ways to delay, ways to sidestep. One thing that happened that was good was a lot of Southern states started quickly trying to equalize the school system. So that's when a lot of Black schools were built or slated to be built to kind of get them caught up with what they had been doing for the white schools. CCSD merged at this time. There was a city, Athens City Schools and then Clark County Schools, and they came together around 1956, I think. Again, that's one of those things where I get different stories, different places, but it was kind of in anticipation of this happening. And then they adopted a freedom of choice plan, which meant you were allowed to go to the school of your choice if the school board approved. Yeah, exactly. And that's also the time that some groups formed to try to get rid of some of these massive resistance laws. The law in Georgia would automatically close any school that was desegregated. So the state funding would be removed and the state could actually order the school closed. And that's what happened in Little Rock. And it also happened in Virginia, Prince Edward County. Prince Edward County didn't have public schools for 5 years because they would rather shut down the entire system than, yeah. So if the Brown ruling came in 1954, when do you think Clark County Schools ended its dual system of Black and white schools? So not when did the first Black children go to a formerly white school, but when were these schools considered integrated? Is the Pear Deck working? Okay. All right, let's see how we did. Very astute. 1963 is the day that desegregation started. So that is when the first Black children went to formerly white schools, but truly getting rid of the dual school system and not having Black schools and white schools happened in 1970. Now, just as a side note, I am from Indianapolis, and our schools also were running an unofficial dual system where the public schools had kind of gerrymandered the districts. So it was clearly white schools and Black schools, and they were not desegregated, integrated until 1981.
Whoa.
So yeah.
Wow.
In the North, at least in Indiana and Illinois, there was a lot of housing discrimination. So it was easy to say our schools are, that's a Southern problem, all of these whites only. We don't have that problem. We welcome everyone, except for they really didn't because of housing, but that's we could have another class on that. But anyway, so 1970 is when that happened. And so this whole thing of massive resistance, these were the segregationists who came together. It sometimes was called the Uptown Klan, because it was really a lot of business people in some areas. They weren't quite as violent as as the Klan, and they didn't wear robes, but they did intimidate people. And they formed these groups right after Brown. It was in direct reaction to Brown, called White Citizens Councils. The first one started in Alabama. In some states, they actually ran private schools. But in most states, they organized and they pressured white people, one, to fight against any attempts to desegregate. And they also intimidated Black people from wanting to desegregate as well. So there's a story of a kid in Atlanta. His family moved to Atlanta. They moved into the house. The dad went to work. The kid went for a walk, saw the school nearby, and thought, well, I'll just stop in and find out about signing up. It was a white school, and he didn't know that this was a Black family. And by the time he had got home, his dad had been fired from his job. So that's kind of how white supremacy operates. They polarize people, and then they don't want anyone to break ranks. People who agreed that desegregation was a good thing, even white people were sometimes accused of being communists. They were definitely called race traitors. Calling someone a integrationist was, in white circles, a big insult. So that's the atmosphere that all of this is happening in. So in Georgia, the law, like I said, would trigger the schools to close and the schools to lose all of their funding. In 1959, CCSD started the freedom of choice. So if you were if you wanted to go to another school in the district, you could apply to the school board. And so if you look at the minutes from the CCSD school board, no African Americans applied during this time period until '63. Well, I don't know if that necessarily means that they didn't want to do this, but I think you can answer this question. How do you think this created a burden for Black students and families?
You need to go back to the Pear Deck, right?
Yep.
Yeah, maybe remind us.
Yeah, go back to the Pear Deck to answer this question.
All right.
I know it's tricky to do this on Zoom with the Pear Deck.
No, it's cool. I'll just, sure.
Oh, and if I keep my mouse in the right place, then the whole slide will show.
What's the code for the Pear Deck again? You gotta close the window accidentally.
It should be. Oh, let me, YHHGBH.
Thank you.
No, that's all right. I just had my. I'll take a couple minutes and then we'll look at all of our responses. So most white people were if they weren't in the White Citizens Council, they were very intimidated by the White Citizens Councils. So they kind of just kept quiet during all of this time. The first group of white people to kind of stand up and say, we don't want our schools to close, we don't think this is a good idea, were a bunch of white housewives. There was a group called Hope that started in Atlanta, and Athens had a chapter too, and they lobbied the state legislature to change the rules. The state eventually had a series of hearings, and they showed up at the hearings and spoke out. And this in 1958, 1959, 1960 is a pretty big deal for women. This is way before the equal rights movement or women's liberation. These were housewives who wore the pearls and went to the PTA meeting. So it's kind of, and this really, that was what my master's thesis was really about, was these women organizing. They kind of found their voice, and a lot of them became political activists, and some of them became civil rights, very involved in the civil rights workers. Not all of them, because for some of them, it was about keeping the schools open and not really about desegregation. It was more, we can live with desegregation but we want our schools open. Like I said, a lot of moving pieces here. That's right. That's a really good point. How would you like to be the person that was responsible for no one having public schools? That created a lot of pressure that kind of kept things the way they were. So, yeah, absolutely. And the whole system, even without the school closing law, would have and did put the pressure on Black students. It was a much harder experience for them than for anyone else. Yeah, that's a really good point about how to apply for children to attend white schools. I don't know how simple or complicated that process was, and it could have been very complicated. I know in Atlanta it was very complicated. Intentionally. All right, anybody want to? Yep, the original Housewives of Atlanta. They were a cool group. Frances Polly was one of them. I don't know if anyone's heard of her. There's her biography is called Everybody's Grandmother and Nobody's Fool. I think she was like a 50-year-old woman at this time, very high class in Atlanta. And she didn't take anything from anybody, but she wound up working in Albany. She got arrested in Albany in the Albany movement of the civil rights movement. This, nice white lady. But for her, it was the real thing. All right. Questions, comments? Feel free to pipe in. So this really had, this event changed everything for Clark County schools when Hamilton Holmes and Charlene Hunter Galt were admitted because of federal order to the University of Georgia. It triggered this automatic law that should close UGA. While no governor wanted to close UGA, no state legislator wanted their name attached to UGA being closed. So very quickly after this happened, the law was repealed. So you can see both of these things, it was like in a month because they didn't want to do that. So then that opened the door for other school districts to desegregate without the fear of losing state funds. And that happened here in 1963. So we had 5 students, excuse me, Walucia Green, Marjorie Green, Agnes Green, Bonnie Hampton, and Scott Michael became the first Black students. And they all attended different schools in Clark County. And most of them would tell you that they were not in classes with other Black students. So this is kind of an idea of what desegregation looked like. And you can see in this picture the difference between desegregation and integration. And most students will describe this experience being very lonely because no one spoke to them, and they just kind of were on their own as an island all day long, every day. So 1966 was another important milestone. This is really important because sending Black students to white schools with white students is one thing. Sending white students to a school where a Black woman has authority over them is another thing. That is another important milestone. And so in 1966, many Black women became the first Black teachers at white schools, or formerly white schools, in Clark County. The schools were still pretty much white. So Jeanette Browning, Johnny Leigh Burks, Ruth Hawk Payne, Betty Henderson Holston, and Victoria Baker Stroud were those women who broke that barrier. So, and Jesse put this in the chat. Soon after all of this started, we started seeing private academies open in Athens. That's not a coincidence. And then by 69, the federal government had become much more aggressive about enforcing Brown. And as part Title VI of the Civil Rights Act required equality in education. And so the federal government was able to tell CCSD they had to desegregate or lose federal funding, and it was a lot. So that's when busing started. And by 1970, the schools were all merged and there were no more Black or white high schools. And in the case of high schools, Bernie Harris, which was the Black high school, and Athens High School were merged, and they became Clark Central High School. So the way that merger happened led to some protests, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But first, I want to honor these two women who were part of the Icebreakers, the chosen to make that. And Mrs. Burks has been very helpful in giving us some documents to help put this presentation together. So we appreciate the work that they have done and continue to do. So this was the superintendent. So there was a superintendent who retired right as this was happening, and then a new superintendent that started. And this was just him talking about busing, which think about this comment when you, we're going to watch a video together. And I just want you to remember this comment because there's some other comments that some people make in the video. But for half a century, we've been busing Black students past white schools and vice versa to maintain segregation. Now we're busing to eliminate segregation. By the way, both of the superintendents had crosses burned on their lawns at this time, according to our records. That's somebody had written that on the margin of some of the notes that we had. So, yep. We appreciate her telling us that because that's the only way we know. All right, so we're going to watch a video together. If you don't hear you should hear the audio, but if you don't, let us know in the chat. But this, and if you go off the Pear Deck and back to your Zoom screen, I think it'll work better. So we're going to watch about 6 minutes of this video. It's a documentary that was produced in 1972 about busing in Athens, Georgia.
This report covers some 3,500 miles through.
Oh, okay.
Our first stop, Clark County, Georgia, 90 miles east of Atlanta, in the heart of the old Cotton Kingdom. William Tate.
I came here in 1920, and it was then the largest inland cotton market in the world before the boll weevil hit and the Cotton Kingdom was killed. And it was a town that grew up around the founding of the plantations, and there are a lot of houses in Athens that was based on the ownership of slaves and the cultivation of cotton.
Clark County schools have been desegregated since 1969. The Supreme Court ruled in 1970 in a case brought by some Clark County parents that the county's desegregation plan was legal and workable. Thus, Clark County is the only school district in the United States with a Supreme Court stamp of approval.
And I think the average Southerner, and you know we're in the Bible Belt, average Southerner actually had a little pang of conscience that he hadn't treated the Negro right. I think that was in all of them. Also down deep, we Southerners, with all of our hot-headedness, we have a kind of respect for government.
The Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment does not entitle persons to choose which school their child will attend. I'm Eugene Epting, attorney for the Board of Education of Clark County, Georgia, and this is an excerpt from a brief filed by us in the Supreme Court of the United States in support of the position of the Clark County Board of Education. I'm opposed to the busing, too. I wish it wasn't necessary. But as long as the housing patterns remain what they are, busing is necessary.
Certainly one of the most frustrating problems of this whole business of busing has been our relationship, or at least the school superintendents and school administrators' relationship with the president and many other officials. we are faced with the problem of having to desegregate schools, and yet we're also faced with the problem that the president and our governor and most of the officials in the country have said that they are against busing. This is frustrating because most of our children live in black neighborhoods and white neighborhoods. And of course, when we then have to desegregate, we're going to either have to move some of these children out or move some other children in order to be able to have a mixed school or an integrated school.
I'm Estelle Farmer, principal of the Oglethorpe Avenue School in Athens, Georgia. From our point of view, in this particular school, busing has worked out satisfactorily. Our children are making progress academically. They seem to be happy, adjusted. It seems to me that we're making progress as a unitary school in this district.
Boys and girls, we're going to talk a little bit now about the story that we read about Dr. Dan. And do you remember when he built the hospital? What was so important about that hospital? It has to do with our discussion today. Okay, Regina?
He was the first black man to make the hospital for whites and blacks.
For whites and blacks. That was the first hospital in Chicago to ever have both white people and black people. Do you think that was a good idea?
Yes.
Why do you think it was a good idea, Regina?
Because, like, if there was a white hospital way over on the other side of town, if someone gets sick, they would have to go way over there.
That's right. Okay, Marty?
Like, if you were in front of the hospital, the only white people go to, and like Wanda got hit, you had to take her way over there just to get her to another hospital.
Okay, all.
Like a black person gets sick, and they have to come across town, and about the time they get across town, they probably be dead.
That's right. That was a good point.
Just because you're free.
I think it's working just beautifully. We have children from very different backgrounds. It's an exciting environment to be in. The children feel this, and we feel this. And the biggest benefit is having children learn from one another. Did any of you learn anything special or that you felt is important this morning from our story about prejudice, about the way we're different? Regina?
You can like your friends whether what color they are.
Okay. Terry?
If someone's wearing glasses, that doesn't mean you can't like them, because someday you might have to wear glasses.
That's right. Steve?
Somebody calls you names, it doesn't mean that you're not any worse than them.
Right. Karen?
It's nice to have colored and white friends because the colored are just as nice as some of the white. When you play football and the quarterback tell you...
If we had an all-black school, there wouldn't be different environments contributing, and there wouldn't be as much learning from one another. I really think that busing has been a great boon to education.
A majority of parents were in favor of integration, but a majority of parents were also opposed to busing.
My personal fears wasn't so much for the integration, you know, it's just the fact that I can't see busing a kid past one school to get him to another one. I've never been able to understand this. I still don't understand this. He's got a wonderful teacher, and he's learning real well, but I'd still chuck it for neighborhood school system.
I personally am against busing. I'd rather my children go to school in an integrated school because they're going to have to live with it 10, 20 years from now.
I, too, am not quite sure that busing is the answer. And as a way of achieving equal educational opportunities for the black student, if it does this, then it's good. But I'm wondering if we can do it some other way.
Well, how can we do it another way? You see, black children live in certain areas of the city. White children live in certain other areas of the city. Now, how do you do away with a dual school system without doing some transportation of children?
Why do you like coming to Oglethorpe Avenue on a bus? Why do you like it? Oliver?
Like when it be real cold, you won't have to go out in the cold and walk to school. You can just go on the bus.
Okay. Regina?
Like if it be snowy, your hands won't have to freeze walking in the snow.
Tom?
In the summertime, you'll be on the bus and be watching everything out like little birds on the tree, something like that.
Okay, you get to see a lot, don't you?
I think children are much less upset by change than we as adults are. And I doubt that children suffer the way we may anticipate that they're going to.
Like my parents were really scared more than I was, and they're the ones that made me scared. And like I was scared maybe the first week, but after I got in there and it wasn't as bad as everybody said it was.
But a lot of white parents, I don't think they wanted it to happen, but it's one thing they couldn't stop, I guess.
When I got there, and I proved them wrong because I got along with them just fine. And my mother still gives me problems like, well, Leo is one of my best friends. Sometimes he wants just to talk, so he calls and talks. And Mother says, well, what does he call here for, And I said, well, just because he wants to talk. He says, well, I don't like him calling. And I said, well, look, Mother, I said, everybody's entitled to their friends. And just because a few of mine are black, don't cut me down for it. Leo's just one of my good friends. You got good friends, I got good friends, too. It just happened a couple of mine are black, She doesn't understand, but I think she will after a while. Hope so, anyway.
Don't communicate your fears to your children any more than you can possibly help, because they are going to have to live with a situation that you have never lived with. And you really don't know, and they don't know what's going to happen in it. And they pick up instinctively your attitudes, and your attitudes may cause problems when they have to face things that you didn't face.
I can honestly say that I don't think the adults, white and black, don't get along as good as the children, the teenagers do. I think it's going to have to start with us. We're going to have to start getting it together because I think they're not going to try it.
It's really an interesting point of view, I guess. It's fun to see the kids and hear them talking and see how people felt. I'm going to go to the next slide and just kind of have you reflect on this video and also the comment about busing made by the superintendent, and then some of the things that some of the students that went through this had to say. And just think about the different points of view. Fanny Smith said the one thing you really felt is that you were totally isolated. Once you went out of the classroom, you're on your own. And if you went to lunch, you were on your own. It's like you're an island by yourself. Linda Davis said we were taught about nonviolence. We were taught to ignore the taunts. We were taught to ignore the stares, to ignore anything that anybody did to us, because we were warned that it was not going to be easy and it may not be pleasant, but we were there for a purpose. When I spoke with Linda, she talked about not really wanting to do it that much, but feeling like it was important to do. Like she wasn't just like told, here's a new school that you're going to, I hope you like it, but we need you to help us desegregate the schools. And so she felt that weight, even as I think she was 8 or 9 when she went through this. It was pretty obvious that the white schools were better as far as getting an education. You could tell by the school books. At the black school, we got the books that they couldn't use the white schools anymore. You'd get books with pages torn out, and the white schools would get new updated books. Lucia Green. Some people would be friendly in class, but not in the halls where other people could see you. It was like they wanted to be nice. They just didn't want other people to know they were being nice. And that was Marjorie Turner. The disappointment I have out of that is that none of the black schools survived. That's when the eraser of the black community really officially launched. And that was Linda Davis. So I would just like your thoughts now on how the video compares to what some of the students said or other things that you've thought. Just kind of compare and contrast. I'm going to share this. I had some books that I wanted to wave around.
I think there's a bullet in the first methodology book.
Yeah. No, I don't know that.
Okay, what is it?
Yes,
The Mike, no, those are different ones. The Michael Thurman book and a book. called
Untold
White and
Story?
White. Yeah,
You put them somewhere?
yeah. Here they are.
That was
The
probably
story
what I
of my
knew.
life.
I thought that those
Oh.
were in the wet, you know what I
Oh,
mean?
yeah, yeah.
I moved them from there. I'm so sorry.
That's all right. It's no, I would do these things to myself all the time. All right, let's see what we're looking at. Mm-hmm. Yeah, good comments, everybody. One of the things that if you watch the entire documentary, and I put a link to this presentation, which will give you a link to that video, which is in the archives, is there's a lot of comments about the North and what's going on at the North. So 1972 is when there were riots in Boston over busing and also riots in Detroit. So I kind of got the feel from the video that a lot of people were trying to make it look like, well, the South hasn't figured out what's wrong with you all. So I think that is one way to kind of contextualize the video. And also when you're on TV, you're not going to be super blatantly racist, at least not in 1972. In 1954, people were pretty comfortable being completely racist. I'll change the settings on that, Jesse, in a moment. So as I went through the archives, I found some really interesting stories, and some people have heard of this and some people haven't. But right before the merger of the two high schools, there was an incident that was called Rowdy Thursday. And so it started with some of the Black students at Athens High, which was then the white school, and some students of Bernie Harris out of class, milling around over a newspaper article they had read. They wound up, there was some running in the hallway, somebody got knocked over, some other disruptions. They wound up going outside and meeting somewhere, the students from both high schools, and then going back to the schools. They wanted to talk to the schools. They were upset about the merger. They were upset about some of the things that were being said. Somebody in the newspaper had called them militants. And then the reaction was restraining orders issued against 12 students and then John Doe 1 through 100. It escalated into marches through downtown Athens. There was also a black buyers boycott. And eventually the school board agreed to meet and discuss their grievances. Mainly the grievance was that Bernie Harris was just being merged into Athens High School and was really going to disappear. And if you look at this quote from a senior who was going to be a senior in 1970, it looked as if Bernie Harris and everything that was associated with it was going to be swallowed up in the merger. We had everything to lose and nothing to gain. So these are the concessions. These were some of the things that the Black students wanted. And I think it speaks very highly of what they were concerned about, what they cared about, and it shows you what they were afraid of losing. If you want to take a look and look at this list. While you're looking at that, I'm going to change the share settings on this. It should open now, Jesse. So these are some newspaper articles from that time about the Rowdy Thursday disorder. The marches, a lot of Black people were arrested. Tear gas was deployed. It was called a racial incident. And then they were able to then meet with the school board, and they got a lot of the things that they wanted. The important things they wanted were things like a Black Studies class. And they wanted to have some Black influence on the textbook and curriculum decisions that were being made. So I think it speaks very highly of these students, the things that they cared about. Yes, I think that would be a great dissertation. So some more newspaper articles. I was really looking for pictures in the newspaper, but I just found the headlines, which were interesting. I did find something else. So this was and historians know this feeling, when you're looking for something and then you find something else and it kind of makes your heart stop for a second because it tells you a story that you weren't expecting to find or weren't necessarily looking for. So this is April 16th. This was the day after, or this was the day of Rowdy Thursday. All this is happening with the desegregation, tensions are building. And here's an article about the State Board of Education, and I know it might be hard for you to read, this adopting a new policy allowing school children to cross county lines to attend other schools. Does anybody else find that interesting, or is it just me? The timing is, but then I'm going to show you something else. We'll go back to that. So here's the article about Athens, Bernie Harris quiet, attendance off. This is on the Friday after Rowdy Thursday. This is the front page of I think this is the Daily News, the morning paper. If you look down, the article right below the story of Rowdy Thursday, where it says God will be alive in our school, that is an article about the new academy that will be opening, Athens Christian Academy, that will be opening in Athens in the fall. Just something I found interesting. So if anybody wants to talk, I would love to hear what you have to say. What do these demands say about how many Black students felt about the merger? And yeah, I agree, Mantu, that we'll talk about how things change.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I just need to plug in that. So come to a crashing halt. I think it'll make it. If it doesn't reach, I'll let you know. This is pretty long. I think it'll be it. Okay. Yeah. All right, let's see what you all have to say. Yes, I was really impressed. I mean, I teach high schoolers and I love them and I am so impressed with the things they do too. So I shouldn't seem surprised, but it goes against the stereotype, I guess, we have about teenagers not caring about things. And they organized without cell phones, people.
Right. No social media.
Right.
No Facebook, no Twitter.
They were using rotary phones that were attached to walls. Yes, they were revolutionaries. Excuse me. And can you all see each other's comments on your Pear Deck? Or so you just need me to do, okay. Yeah, this is an important comment. Black students felt they were losing something, even though supposedly they were gaining something. There's a big misunderstanding, I think, or not misunderstanding, misconception, misperception, that a lot of white people have about the purpose of desegregation or integration. That it was, a lot of it was about equalization and having equal resources and access to the same things that the white students have access to. What a lot of white people in their ego think was that black kids wanted to be with the white kids, that they just wanted to be with us, which is, that's not what it was all about. But there is that thought, unfortunately. All right, anybody want to share? Want to unmute and speak up about anything? I can keep going, but if anybody wants to talk.
Hey y'all, it's Amelia again, the disembodied voice from AADM. And I just keep returning to the fact that like the more interesting story is the story of the experiences of the Black students. Like this is incredibly interesting, right? Teenagers who are successfully organizing for like real change, like that's the history, that's the truth that we need to learn as well. I think that like these young children that Beth read the quotes about how brave they were and how they had this like sense of purpose to be part of a larger movement. Like that's a way more interesting story than that white girl talking on the video about like, oh, my mom and my friends, you know? So I think it's just reminding me, a tenet of CRT, right, is counter storytelling. Like let's tell different stories. And so for me as an educator, it's just a reminder that that's the pedagogical move I need to turn to. Like find the real story, find the interesting story and stop reproducing the story that's kind of been handed down to us. And yes, focus on like clearly systemic violence and justice, but also like the strength and the courage and the brilliance of these Black students who are really like, they are the ones we should be learning from and really centering and honoring. So just, I appreciate Beth for like raising those community leaders who are children and teenagers to the surface and reminding us that counter storytelling is really important.
Anybody else? Yay. Oh, thank you. Takes a village to run a Zoom. So the other cool thing, and I haven't been able to find out as much as I would like about this, but as part of this, there were a series of liberation schools and freedom schools that took place that spring and summer. And these were held, some of them were held at UGA, but a lot of them were held in churches and community centers around Athens. And they really focused on Black studies and Black social justice and that sort of thing. They did not, I believe, continue after the merger, but they were kind of used as a way, I guess, to prepare students for this merger. So, and if anybody knows anything else about them, that would be a great thing to study. All right, and then we have this quote from Agnes Green. Let me move my mouse so we can see the whole thing. We lost that community feeling. You know, the old saying, it takes a community to raise a child. And I think that back when I was growing up, we had a community, and I do not know if these kids now have a community. An entire culture was lost because we had to incorporate ourselves into their culture. Whereas when we had Bernie Harris High School, it was our high school. That was ours, and we lost that when we had to go to another institution, even though it might have been better, the material things. The main thing that was lost was the love, the caring, and the embracing that we got from our teachers. So fast forward to today, I wanted to share with you all some of the statistics on demographics here and some of our other schools. So this is just the demographics in Athens versus the demographics at our schools. And as you can see, they're not the same. Athens is 55% white, 28% Black, 11% Hispanic Latino, 4% Asian, and 2% multiracial. At CCSD, we teach students who are 20% white, 49% Black, 25% Hispanic Latino, 1% Asian, and 5% multiracial. So our student enrollment does not look like our city. And then when we look at our staff, that also doesn't look like our city or our students. We are 73% white, 22% Black, 2% Hispanic Latino, 2% Asian, and less than 1% multiracial. Moving on, these are some of the surrounding school and then two of the academies in Athens. So the Athens Academy is 76% white. Athens Christian Academy is 81% white. Oconee County Schools is 82% white. So this is white flight, and there's a great book that explains white flight written by Kevin Cruz, a historian. And he kind of explains that white people thought that these were their schools and their swimming pools and their drinking fountains and their golf courses and everything else. And when they were forced to desegregate, they felt like something had been taken away from them. So they took themselves and their money and went elsewhere and built their own schools or went to their own counties and put their tax dollars there. And that's really what white flight is. And we can kind of see that in these statistics. This is population growth for Clark County and Oconee County, again, demonstrating that white flight. There's other factors happening here as well, but we noticed the change in 1970. Between 1970 and 1980, Clark County has 14% growth, while Oconee County has 57% growth. And then that growth continues in Oconee County, 42%, and then 87% between 2010 and 1990. So you can see that Clark County is growing, but not nearly as fast as Oconee County. And this, and I know it's a little bit hard to see, but this is our district map for Clark County elementary schools. And each of these areas is a school, and the schools are really small in red, but you can look at this map on the CCSD website because it's just the zoning, the attendance zonings. So you can see the differences in some of our schools as well. And I don't know if that's something you want to talk about or think about, but there are some schools that do not have any white people at all in our district. There's 3 of them that have a 0% white population. And then there is a school that is 53% white. Any thoughts?
We need to rezone for our elementary schools.
Elementary.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks pretty whack to me. So last question, and then we can just do a Q&A, and it's almost time to wrap things up. Anyway, it kind of has worked out well. What's the legacy of segregation and how do we honor these students and teachers who broke these barriers? Thanks, Ms. Neal. Some people had said something had happened in the 90s, but I wasn't able to find much more about that. So I knew that there was something. A parent lawsuit, correct? Hmm. Let's go ahead and see what we all think. Oh, that's fine. You can write. You can talk too.
Jesse's been here every night.
He has. That's interesting because of the way they were integrated, where the Black schools folded into the white schools. And even when we discuss and talk about, it's the facilities that were inferior in the Black schools, but the teachers were better. Or as good, at least. That's all the students talk about, how caring the teachers were. And I think some of the teachers were highly, highly educated because it wasn't that, I mean, there weren't that many opportunities employment wise. Anyway.
Can you address what she said about the way they get around it? The way they get around what?
Oh, interesting. So when you have to, I guess you don't have to, but when you are categorized by race, you are either, and this is on the census and in our schools, you're either Black, white, multi-Asian, Pacific Islander, Native American, and then, or white, and then your ethnicity is Hispanic or not Hispanic. So you can be Hispanic white or Hispanic Native American. But if you're Hispanic white, you're counting, Ms. Neal, you're counting for white, so the schools look more balanced?
The way that OCR designated it, it was either you're Black or you're not Black. So the 55-45 was like Black and not Black. So when Hispanic started to come in the 90s, I'm assuming that's why they did it. I don't know for sure, but they started designating all Hispanics under their race designation as white.
Interesting.
Who is they? They started.
I'm sorry?
By they, do you mean CCSD?
Correct. And I don't know specifically who they say. I don't know who they are, but I'm just knowing how they're designated within the school system. So they keep OCR off their back because when you see those 0% white schools, all the percents that have like the Hispanic kids are counted as white.
Yeah, Office of Civil Rights. Well,
a lot on your map though still wouldn't be in compliance, I think, but I don't think that it's been looked at for many, many years.
Yeah. Well, and there's a few schools, new elementary schools that were supposed to open, and I think that's part of that. And I know that was kind of we could be here all night if we want to. I've heard a little bit about all of that. But yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I think all of the points that you all are making are very, very good. And I really appreciate the thoughtful comments. So I put the links for this in the chat, and there's a link for the video in the slides. I can also just, oh, you did? Okay. Okay. And I also put this through. These are some of the places where I got the information. If you're interested, one of this was an amazing, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. This book, oh, did you not want me to do that?
No. I said, woo.
Oh, I thought you said no. Michael Thurman's book, which has just been republished, is excellent. It's a great resource on the schools and just the history of Black Athens. It's wonderful. I loved it. I really enjoyed reading it. And then again, White Flight helps explain some of the things that happen after desegregation. Well, if anybody wants to share comments, questions, etc., now would be a great time. I really appreciate you all being here and listening. I know this was long and listening to me. I hope you enjoyed the information, got something out of it, and I really thank you for being here.
Somebody else just came in.
Does anyone have any questions?
I think that Matt is trying to.
Oh.
Thanks so much for sharing with us. Really great.
It's my pleasure.
All right. We good?
Yep, we're good.
Okay, so thank you all so very, very much on behalf of the Athens Anti-Discrimination Movement, Mocha Jasmine Johnson, and the whole gang. Just like to thank our fantastic AADM interns, Sierra and Samantha. Thank you very much. You all rock. We would not have been able to do it without them. I want to thank our awesome co-lead, Amelia Wheeler. And thank you so much. You rock as well. And then Beth Mendenhall for such an amazing job that she did with the desegregation of Athens schools. Just a top-notch job. And we are so thankful to you as someone who coming from Indiana to teach this class here in Georgia. We appreciate it. And we are very filled with gratitude and thankfulness to you. Thank you. Finally, thank you to all of you who came out here tonight to the Athens Anti-Discrimination Movement Justice Center, as well as those of you who are participating on Zoom. Thank you very, very much. We need you and we love you, and we appreciate the support that you give us, as well as all K through 16 teachers, educators here in the South who are across the country who want to teach the truth in classrooms. We are in week 3 and we have 5 more weeks to go. Every Thursday, we're going to be here, skipping over Thanksgiving, November 25th. But we will be here, and we hope that you will come back and join us every single Thursday. We appreciate you so much. Without any hearing none and seeing none, that's it. We're going to say goodnight. Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you, Miss Neal. Thank you, Aaron. Montu, God bless you. Thank you, brother. Thank y'all. Have a great night. Bye.
Thank y'all. Good night.
That's awesome. Yay. Cool. And we're out.
You know what we should do for like everyone, so people who come to every session, we should like dummy up like a certificate to be like, you're a teacher.